I'm going to give a quick overview presentation, not to take as little time as possible from our four great speakers today. So we'll talk a little bit about what are the consequences of unplanned downtime and causes, some of the strategies to help reduce it, and how virtualization is certainly a key part of that, and how you really need to be on an IIoT convergence strategy to really help implement some of the things you need to be doing to reduce unscheduled downtime, and then a quick wrap up. At ARC, we're coming up with some stats based on the age of the installed base of things like DCSs, PLCs, and PACs, we're at about $65 billion of equipment that's functionally working today, but in need of replacement, and about $53 billion of that equipment is actually over 20 years old. So plenty of good historic PLC 5s and SLCs that are still running certainly in many of your plants as well. And we estimate that that's about 5% of process production, about $20 billion a year, is impacted by this unscheduled downtime. So getting into some more stats, I mean, as far as 2 to 5% of lost production in petrochemicals, just the ability to, in some natural gas compression station, about $10,000 per hour, 5 to 10% increase that companies need to do for their inventories just to be able to kind of factor that in. And the thing is that the difference between a planned scheduled downtime for something like maintenance or upgrades versus unscheduled, the unscheduled costs about 10 times more. So whether it's operator error, equipment failure, nuisance trips, but the idea is not only is it something that can cost your company a lot of money, but also creates safety hazards, and ultimately everybody's key performance indicators are lowered as a result. And the idea is, what can you do to create a system that's somewhat fault tolerant to kind of make sure that it's the assets not causing the downtime, but at the same time humans are involved. So what are you doing as far as training and giving them the information that the humans need to make sure that they're not the cause of the unscheduled downtime? So one of the ways that we certainly recommend is make sure that whatever equipment and solutions are being adopted, that at a minimum that they follow industry standards where possible. Because you certainly do, the more proprietary equipment, not only is certainly there issues from connecting that equipment, but also when that equipment needs to be upgraded or replaced, or the people who have installed the equipment and have all the knowledge in this database, and when they then leave the plant and then they're replaced, a lot of that proprietary information has gone out the door. As we all certainly know, like in MES, of people that create their own Excel MES spreadsheets and then try to figure that out when those people have left. So from a strategies perspective, I think you're all very, very familiar with virtualization, whether you're doing things with VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V, Stratus, which you'll certainly hear a little bit more about that today. But the idea is that putting together systems where now, you're able to uncouple upgrades from hardware and software, you're able to save IT staff, you're able to save energy, because now you're actually running fewer systems when you take a method of, when you go in a virtualization direction. The other thing we look at, of course, is fault tolerance, to make sure we have, with virtualization, that we have the necessary redundancies that it takes to make sure that one incident isn't going to take down the entire process, or even worse, the entire plant, and certainly be able to maintain the data integrity where possible. We also talk about disaster recovery to make sure that that data has been sent somewhere, especially off-site, where if there is a disaster at the plant, that the data is safely someplace else. Now, it's very, very funny, because there are people who still have, not as many as in the past, but there have been people who've been reluctant to ever use the word cloud. And in many cases, we'll say cloud, and we'll say we don't do that. And we'll say, well, okay, well, what if we have a disaster recovery strategy where we send your information to some servers located in an off-site? And they say, well, that sounds good. And say they just don't, but they won't use the word cloud, and we haven't really figured out why. But anyways, but with more and more people, we do think that barrier is falling anyways, as far as utilizing the word cloud to to get involved with some of these processes. But the point is getting that data off-site. But to really be able to implement any of this, companies really need to be moving along their journey of IIoT convergence, leveraging a lot of the technologies and cybersecurity expertise that IT brings, but at the same time understanding the issues of things like real time and why processes need to run 24/7 and why you just can't do patches and upgrades and updates kind of in the middle of a process run. So, I think most companies are making progress in this regard, some companies further along than others, but it is something that down the road, for you to really have a good strategies to reduce downtime, you really have to be well on your journey for IIoT convergence. So, in summary, we all know the consequences of unplanned downtime, both from a cost perspective as well as a safety perspective and what it does to plant KPIs. But again, if you take strategies that utilize, industry standards, leveraging a lot of virtualization technologies, and then also make sure you're along your IIoT journey, I think you'll be going well along trying to get that downtime reduction strategies for your plant. So with that further ado, I'm going to introduce Dan and Craig. They're going to come up here from Sugar Creek Foods, and they're going to kick us off today.